speaks to you about this time. But otherwise, we're just going to let this kind of be a conversation space, an opportunity for us to think through and talk through what it means to have racial equity at the gaming table or wherever we might be playing our video games. And so I'm going to let our guests introduce themselves. We have Reverend Annalise and Garth Stevens Jennings. Tell us about yourself. What spaces do you inhabit? What's your background in ministry? What makes you a nerd? Let us know a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Annalise. I am a pastor in Winchester, Virginia, and nerd spaces that I occupy include I'm a cosplayer. I am, oh my gosh, what else do I do? Lots of D&D, a lot of D&D. A few video games. I am not great at them. I'm not super native to video games, so I don't play as many. Um, I play a lot of Sims, like way too much Sims. Um, I play oh my gosh, what else? Elder Scrolls games. Um, Sea of Thieves. Garth and I play a lot of Sea of Thieves. Um,
Valheim.
Valheim, big fan. Phasmophobia, love. Uh, and oh my gosh, I have at least what's the other one? Oh, Stardew Valley. So we do a lot of that. Games that we can play with our friends. That's the stuff that we do the most. So ESO, that's another one I guess that counts as an Elder Scrolls game. I think of them as so different because they feel different. Um, but but yeah, those are most of my nerd spaces. I'm also a big fan of comic books, like in general, and I like a lot of nerdy books as well. We're big Terry Pratchett fans, and Tolkien. Lots of like high fantasy British dudes, honestly.
We have a whole room in our house dedicated to Lord of the Rings.
This is correct.
Love it.
Complete with replica swords and some really beautiful cross-stitch pieces that my dad made for us, which are really cool. Because he's also a Tolkien nerd, so it was neat to have like all of it come together. So that's cool. Yeah, that's most of my nerd spaces. What about you?
Well, what about your history background?
I already said that.
Oh, you did? Okay. Well, I'm Garth Stevens Jennings. I am a minister currently serving a Presbyterian church in Charlestown, West Virginia. Um, so my journey as a nerd began at age 5 when I watched one of my cousins play the computer strategy game Command and Conquer, and was immediately smitten. Um, and since then, I've always had a love of strategy games. Uh, any sort, I'll play it. Total War games, competitive MOBAs like League of Legends, um, any kind of real time strategy, StarCraft, Warcraft. Been playing that since Warcraft 1, I think. Um, and then, of course, all of the Paradox Grand Strategy games, where when you hit 3,000 hours in those games, that's when you're considered kind of okay at them. Um, but I love almost any kind of video game, and it would be if I were to list everyone that I've played, we'd be here for 3 or 4 hours, I'm sure.
Yeah, what are you playing the most of right now?
Most of right now, probably either League of Legends because a bunch of my friends are back into it, and that's the primary reason to play that game. And Sea of Thieves because all of the youth at my church like it.
There's what else? What's the like strategy that have you been
Oh,
playing?
Victoria 3, I've been
Victoria.
playing a lot of.
Okay.
Although I'm starting to cool on it because it's hard to play it without it being a colonialism simulator, and I'm not a fan of that.
You did a lot of modding for it,
I
though.
did do a lot of modding for
Yeah.
it. Yeah, is that about it? Oh, I'm also big into D&D. Got into it at college, and then we formed our friend group in seminary. Went to the same seminary around D&D. Been playing that ever since. I'm also a huge fan of fantasy novels and sci-fi more than at least.
Yeah, I don't do as much of the sci-fi. I grew up watching Star Trek, So I'm a big fan of the original series Star Trek, and I also loved Star Trek Discovery. And like everything in between, I kind of missed. And then I came in really late to Star Wars. So I'm fine with it. It's fine. That's how I feel about Star Wars. It's fine.
I think that's totally fair.
I really love Rogue One. Rogue One was an incredible movie. Otherwise, they're fine. They're all fine.
That's
It's
great.
fine.
You can be a part of this community,
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah, we have
unless you ask
some.
Zando.
Yeah, everybody but Zando likes Rogue One. He's our resident. That is the worst movie ever. So he's the hot
Oh,
take with that one. But what is
loved
a gaming
Rogue One.
community without some beloved hot takes? What I
Correct.
think is great about the games that y'all listed, you can very much tell. We did something a few years ago where you take like a game inventory. That we all have these like gaming types, these personas, these things that we really like. It feels like taking a Myers Briggs, but for the games that you like. And if
Yeah.
I had to guess what y'all's would look like, it would be based around, like you said, groups, community,
Yeah.
social elements in games. Whether the games themselves are social, the place where they are happening is a very social place, which as a single player, narrative loving indie gamer, I am introvert away from all of that stuff. And so I always find it fascinating the differences between the spaces where we play games and how that might bring something in with us. So the first thing I want to talk about is whenever it comes to racial equity and having these conversations and just equity in general in gaming spaces, I think we can denote two really distinct places where they happen. And so it typically happens in community. That's where equity would be the most important. And that would be the safe space that I think y'all have already named of your friend groups where you probably already have a lot of the groundwork laid. And then there's the open space. Not necessarily a dangerous space, but it might be the chat of League of Legends. It might be the crosstalk or the conversation happening between people that you don't know and you don't have the groundwork done with. And so, just from that, any experience with those differentiating spaces, the way that you inhabit them, or how you might approach them differently, depending on how you might present yourself there?
Absolutely. We definitely started off doing a lot of games with our friends, and I think that's part of what helped me fall in love with them was the social aspect of them and the ability to get to know people in a different way and share those experiences together. I love using tabletop RPGs as grief support, as therapy. And it's an amazing experience to sit with someone who can talk about things through their character that they can't talk about just sitting across the table from you. It can be really healing to just kind of be able to let your character express the rage or the sadness or the confusion or whatever it is that you're feeling, to let your character speak those things for you if it's too hard for you to do on your own is just amazing and freeing, and usually in my experience at least gets people a step closer to being able to process those things without the need for the extra layer of reality protection, right? And so the without the need for the disambiguation, it just kind of it starts to you can start to heal from things that way, and I think it's really cool. So when I approach a space like a game where I know I'm going to be with my friends, I come into it in a very different mindset than when I come into a space where I don't know the people who are going to be there. I am an absolute wuss about playing MMOs because I am terrified of other people. like I'm like, okay, fine. If you really want me to play WoW, I will play WoW on a private server, right? Like I will not just get out there and play because I'm terrified of the other humans that I'm going to meet there. Um, and and part of that is just bad experiences being in spaces like that, and people say things and do things and tend to act differently in spaces where they think they have some anonymity, and can as safe as it can be to express things that are hard, it can also be safer to express things that you probably wouldn't say to a human being in real life, but for some reason, when you're speaking to their avatar and can't see that there's a human back there, it can be a lot easier to just say terrible things. So when I'm going into those spaces, I never go into them by myself. I always go with other people. Like, I think I've played ESO by myself exactly one time, and when somebody else tried to interact with me, I immediately ran away. But like, I love going into those spaces with other people. It gives me a little layer of protection. So I always go gaming with friends. That's my number one, for trying to find a safer space. If I'm going into it completely with the intention of meeting new people, is a completely different ballgame though. Like, when we play D&D with our church, which we do once a month, at a brewery that's here in town, we get together and play, and we built it on purpose as a safe space, and that was a really cool experience. And because of that, we actually have a ton of kids that come and play now, because we did such a good job of like building this space as a safe space, that it's a lot of like whole families that come, like parents that bring kids, and that's really cool because we're getting to teach new generations about this game that we love, and also getting to know their families. And it means that I get to like rope my children's ministry coordinator into coming, because there are now more like children than there are adults that show up. So I'm like, hey, children's ministry, come on, you get to come play D&D with us. She hasn't been there yet, but we're working on it. It's pretty cool. So that space is all about building hospitality and setting a few ground rules. But it also legitimately helps that there are kids in the space, because adults tend to be on better behavior when kids are around. So we have fewer issues with that kind of stuff too, because hey, there are kids in the space, so be good. So that's nice too. But that was a lot for me, so let me see what Garth has to say.
So you brought up that people feel emboldened when they have anonymity, and I think I agree. There is a gulf between how racial equity dynamics work in games where people are not anonymous, and games where people are both anonymous and feel like they are not committed to any long-term social interaction. So in games like MMOs within like a guild that you're going to be playing in for a long time, um, people will who might have some unfortunate opinions on race will be less likely to voice them because they feel that they worry that there will be long-term social consequences if they start bad-mouthing people or being discriminatory within their guild. But in a place like Call of Duty or League of Legends, where you're going to play a game with somebody for 45 minutes and you never see them again, people tend to feel very emboldened. Oftentimes, it's because they want to be provocative and yeah, and upsetting on purpose, but still people feel emboldened to engage in racism in those situations because they don't feel like they're risking anything. But yeah, the dynamic between a League of Legends hobby or lobby where everyone is randomly match made together, and a Paradox game like Stellaris where most multiplayer that occurs is self-organized by the community, and so you have to not antagonize the community that you're trying to be a part of. It makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And in how often racism will occur.
Yeah.
There was
At least voiced racism.
definitely a video we watched not even long ago that was about how because of the way that League of Legends works, it's always going to be a toxic space, right? That it was like, look, you've got people getting thrown together who don't know each other, who the game, winning or losing the game, is dependent on everybody's participation and knowing what they're doing and knowing how to handle the character that they picked. and also knowing how to deal with the other people's characters, right? That you have to know your role, know how to do it, and you have to trust instantly in a team of people that you don't know, and that tends to go poorly, and you'll
And if
start yelling at
anybody
each
makes a big
other.
mistake, you see it immediately and can point out what exactly they did wrong.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like it's difficult to and easy to get very upset at people in that space. So I don't know if it's ever going to be salvageable, but I believe that with lots of grace can get
It's-
there.
Especially as
One
far as
person at a
race.
time.
Yeah, as far as race, at least, it's a lot better than it used to be because the company that makes it has introduced a lot of zero policy chat filtering where if somebody says a racial slur, they're going to be banned within 2 hours
Yeah,
automatically.
that's really appreciated.
But, it doesn't prevent toxicity in other ways.
Yeah, there's a really interesting thing that I've discovered in streaming on Twitch for 3 years at this point. Like the anonymity. Not only does it provide like the capacity for toxicity, but it also provides this really interesting capacity for vulnerability in a really quick conversation. And I think that the game table in the TTRPG setting is the same way. Whenever you're willing
Yes.
to play with others around a table, it's the reason why kids find it so fun is because they're already pretty vulnerable. And so if you can get people to be vulnerable around a table, you're gonna experience so much more life together and become instant friends and have a connection that is really enviable in anywhere outside of the gaming space. And I think that
Absolutely, that's
online world-
why we use it.
the online world is
Mhm.
capable of that, but it doesn't always do it well. And I think
Yeah.
the difference between these two worlds that we can explore now is when you're in a game world, whenever you're in League, you may have things like filters of the chat. You may have things like expectation set. But for the most part, the rules and the control is outside of your hands. It's in a third party. But whenever you're around the TTRPG table, you're the one setting those ground rules. And so I want to talk about that, about when we can shape the space, how should we shape that space? What do good, strong table rules look like whenever it comes to making sure that the places we are in control of are equitable?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. So, one of my favorite things to do when playing a new tabletop RPG with somebody is to have a very, standard at this point, session zero, where you will be kind of talking about a whole lot of stuff. Some of the world building mechanics, if the, there's, I often play with folks who have either never played this game before or played it in 3.5 but haven't seen 5th edition yet or came from playing Pathfinder or something like that, right? So when we get together, there might be like a rule you want to import or a build that comes from a different system or something like that. So like all of those kind of general questions we can talk about, and we can also talk about what we expect from each other around the table. So I take the kind of basic structure of that conversation from the game Alice is Missing, which I've talked to Nate about a little bit because I loved it. But it was also soul crushing. We've played it twice and crushed my soul both times, but it was so good. And yeah, thank you. I'm seeing that hearts in the chat. Thank you. Um, loved it, but man, did it break me. But the things that I really, really appreciated about the setup for that game was the kind of rule system around like how we deal with topics. Alice is Missing is dealing with a lot of really heavy stuff right out of the gate. You know it's coming in the game, so it gives you opportunities to say like, "Hey, I understand this is the subject matter of this, but I can't deal with this right now. I can't talk about this in detail, or I can't talk about this at all." And so those kind of rules I will often like ask people about, both about issues surrounding race, but just safety around the table in general. So saying things like, in this world, do we want sexism to exist, or are we going to say gender will not bar you from doing anything in this world? And usually people are like, yeah, let's just have a world where sexism isn't a thing, which is really fun. But sometimes people want to go into that space on purpose. So we'd say, okay, so if sexism exists in this world, then what does that look like? How far are we willing to talk about issues like assault? Can we mention it in passing? Or like, most of us usually are like, it can be mentioned in passing, and we're definitely not role playing any of that, right? Because it's just too much for a lot of people. It would be too much for me, right? So like we will put guardrails like that around an issue. And we'll do the same thing with racism often in those spaces. Like, how do we deal with this? We have I don't know if friend is the right word, an acquaintance who we've played with on many occasions, who will find a way to be racist in any RPG that we play. Do you know who I'm talking about? Thank you. And and I don't know what it is. They just always find a way. Always. They're like, oh yeah, I'm going to play this character. They hate elves. And you're like, why? Why was that even necessary? Like, why did we do this? Because now we just have to have this conversation, like, so it doesn't really matter, like, what it is. Any RPG that we're in, this is a character flaw of their
You don't belong
character.
up there.
Yes, sorry. Cat. Nonsense. Oh,
Sorry.
there we go. So there he goes. He's down now. It is an interesting experience to play at a table with someone like that, who just doesn't understand how like they mean it in jest, but it can be really uncomfortable and upsetting in the moment of like, how far are we going to push this joke before I'm allowed to be like, can we stop here? So yeah.
And so every now and then, someone will want to make a character who's intentionally flawed, which is generally good for trying to create a whole person that you can roleplay as. But sometimes people will choose racism, cultural prejudice, xenophobia as their flaws. And uh, generally, when people do that, if I'm DMing at least, I will ask them, well, why do you want that to be your flaw? Why is it important that your character is discriminatory? And is there a different flaw that could serve the same narrative purpose? Uh, because if you can avoid that in a story, it's generally a good idea. And usually I'm able to talk them down to having something else be the character's foible or stumbling block.
Now, on the other hand of that, I think that it can actually be very fun, and then sometimes even like we've said, it can be healing to intentionally do something like, if I'm going true like Tolkien classic, then I will say like, I will play a dwarf, and I don't trust elves. And then I'll have an elf in my party, and we're gonna have to deal with it. And that can work. There are times when that has been fun,
And
where
then
we
you
can
start competing for
say,
kills and then slowly become friends and then go visit the world together.
correct. So that we can, like, there are ways to do it intentionally. And again, I think it can be a bridge builder. I think that it can be a way that people can form actual friendships out of that. But I think that has to be entered into with caution because it can go poorly very
You need
quickly.
to be careful, and I think usually would need to plan it.
And I think again, that's where the ability to, a la Alice is Missing, to be able to have like a symbol, a card, a safe word, whatever it is that says we've gone too far and I need a break, or we've gone too far and I need to stop. Right? Like, we're not talking about this anymore. We're done. I'm walking away. And having those rules that you set up in your session 0 are really, really helpful. And this goes for any of the things that could be difficult, right? That we can talk about bullying in that space. We can talk about, as you said, racism, xenophobia, sexism, homophobia, ableism. We can have all of those conversations. I find ableism to always be a really interesting conversation in that space. Like, I had a group of basically new players, and one of them said, like, I would like to play, it was a pirate campaign, like, I want to play a guy who's missing his arm, so he's got like a hook hand. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but we gotta talk about it. Like, how are we gonna do this? Because like, I want you to have fun. I want you to like play this character, and maybe we can think of some cool stuff. Like, it was kind of a steampunky vibe, right? So it was like, all right, maybe he's got some cool like gadgets and like things he can attach to the hooks, and it may, and to like do cool things, and we're never gonna like play this as a joke. It's always gonna be like, look at this cool thing this person can do. And so that helps too. Of like, okay, so as Garth said, like if somebody really wants to bring this to a table, find out the motivations. He just wanted a character with a really cool hook hand, and I was like, all right, let's do that. And it's good that it's that way, and it's not like we're gonna be, I don't know, making weird jokes about his missing arm the whole time, or telling him he can't do things because he doesn't have an arm or whatever. But saying like, no, we're gonna say we live in this world where your disability is recognized and respected, and we don't say that you can do less. We also respect when you can't do something, right? That like we keep our expectations exactly where they're supposed to be, and everybody gets through this okay, right? And so there are lots of things like that I think could be interesting to explore in those spaces if you've set the expectation that this is a safe place where people can come and explore those things safely.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point of getting down to the root of the why do people want to explore this story. If that's what we're doing, like in the act of play, is exploring stories and exploring interactions with each other, like why does it have to be that exact thing, and what is it about that gets you excited to be this character, or excited to explore this part of their story. I think that's essential in the character creation, and honestly will probably make the story better anyway if you actually have those conversations and lay out those kind of things, regardless of making the place more equitable. Also, just making for a better storytelling experience all around. We don't have time to talk about it, but I'm watching an anime right now, Frieren Beyond Journey's End. And there is an element about it that makes me so uncomfortable, where there are just characters in the show it's an entire race that is evil. Like, it's not like they're being presented as evil and they're going to be redeemed. Like, they're evil. They are evil. And the storyteller of this anime is like, no, this character is irredeemable. And that is such an interesting story that they're trying to tell. I wouldn't do it. It makes me uncomfortable, but they are doing it for a reason. And there's clearly a story they're trying to tell. Like I said, we can't get into it, but I am fascinated. But what it reminds me of is our next kind of twist of conversation before we get into a time for Q&A. And that's talking about, as people, that I'll just speak for myself. As a straight white male, I have a tough time trying to create spaces or tell stories that I feel like I am not either welcome to tell, capable to tell, or adequately able to present. And so, whenever things do what unapproachable, or whenever we see, examples like Frieren, where there is a story that is making us uncomfortable, what do we do? What do we do there? How can we set ourselves up for a successful, equitable story?
So if we're talking about things like tabletop RPGs, then I think one of the best things you can do as a DM is to ask your players to world build with you. And try to get your players to the extent that you can to be co-storytellers. The DM should not be the sole narrator of the story. Now, they arbitrate the rules and they determine the results of actions, but to the extent you can do so without spoiling everything for the players, you want to incorporate them into the storytelling as much as possible and get as much of their input as possible. Because if you all build the world together, then you are able to incorporate different narratives that wouldn't necessarily be from your experience. And if you can get notes from people about how they think characters or settings or societies would function, or how things are aesthetically, then you can incorporate that while still respecting each other's diversity and not falling into the trap of creating your own version of what you think someone is, and missing entirely who they actually are.
Yeah, I definitely would say, as we saw in the video earlier, it's about representation. So, like, if you would really like to tell a diverse story, invite diverse people into the conversation with you. Whether, I mean, even if you just want them to consult, like I'm a big fan. We are both big fans of the McElroys. We love the Adventure Zone, and my brother and me, and I am addicted to Sawbones. And so we're just big fans. And they had a season. Was it the season? It was the season Travis was DMing because, of
Mhm.
course, it was Travis. And Travis wanted to do some work around getting some more diversity in the characters that he was building in his world. And he created a character that did not have the use of their legs and so needed a wheelchair and um, just did a really poor job of introducing the character, playing the character, and it got a lot of backlash. And you could tell his heart was in the right place. Oh, thank Travis for Travis, right? I'm like, okay, Travis. But it was rough. It was hard. It was hard to listen to. And the community of people that he was trying to represent clearly did not feel represented by his attempt. And it's like, y'all have a lot of money and a lot of resources. Did no one think to like ask a disabled person, like not that it is their responsibility to teach you anything, but there are also a lot of people that want to see good representation and would be happy to help you. And even in a setting like that where you can't, well, they wouldn't necessarily want to bring somebody in that's not a member of the McElroy clan to come and play that character. He could at least have gotten some advice and some feedback before he got started. And so I think again, keeping don't tell stories about us without us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should approach it the same way you would approach writing a novel. Um, Although not that straight white dudes are much better about their novel writing than their D&D campaigns. Um, but if you're going to write an experience that you have not had, then consult with and get an editor who is someone who has had that experience and run everything by them first, and then maybe do it. And if it's something that you can't actually relate to, maybe skip it or let somebody else DM a session or that play that character instead of you.
Yeah, there was a a podcast that I used to listen to. This is kind of out of nerd space and into like faith space specifically, but it was by a couple of white male United Methodist pastors in Virginia, who at one point on air essentially said, no, we are not going to invite more women or people of color or queer people into this space because we can just read about their experiences and then share it from our own perspectives. Like, we don't need diversity here in order to teach people about racism. Like, we don't need people of color to come in and have a conversation about racism. We don't need women to come in and have a conversation about gender, or like, non-binary people to come have a conversation about gender, or transgender people to come in. Like, we don't need those. We can have these conversations without those people. As three white male cisgendered humans, we can just say whatever we want, because we read about it. We read it in a book, so that means we know everything. And it was so frustrating. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by the amount of people who heard that conversation and then said, I don't know if maybe like listening to these guys anymore. Right? Like, it was like, y'all are smart. I know that you've done a lot of work, you did a lot of research. We like listening to you talk. But I don't think that's how that works. You don't just get to tell people stories, tell stories about people without inviting them to come in and talk about it. So it was deeply frustrating, and it feels a lot like a lot of different places in my life, where I've walked in and someone's asked me to be on the, diversity, equity, and inclusion team, and I walk into the room and it's just all white ladies and me. And I'm like, okay, well, here's our first problem. Like, we need to get some more people in here. But that's, like, it's well-meaning, I understand, but sway and a miss.
Yeah, it's a common problem, I think, because cisgendered straight white men, um, a lot of us, especially if we went to college, have been socialized to think of ourselves as objective arbiters of reality who can encounter an idea and immediately understand it. And so we think that we can universalize our experience to everyone else, and that we can encounter anyone else's experience and instantly understand it. And partially this is because we've been socialized to think of ourselves as, objective, rational beings, and to have the limitations of our own perspective downplayed. Um, but we need to remember that we are not, in fact, objective, and we are not omniscient, and we are not able to understand everything that is put in front of us. Um, it is a relic of the Enlightenment that we really need to move past.
Yeah.
I hope that was an adequate answer to that question.
Oh, I
We
think it
kind of went
definitely
around
was.
in a circle, but
No, I think it was good. I think that, the tough spot about it all is that we could think of a lot of examples of people that have done it well and people that have done it really poorly. And it does feel a little bit like a crapshoot, like we're just guessing. And I wish that we had people that have done it successfully that would talk more about it so that we could have a better perspective. Like I think about a notoriously quiet person being Toby Fox and how successful he was at writing so many queer characters. And I don't know if he's a queer person or not because he never talked about it. But I sure would love to hear his experience about. I know that Alphys is about the weirdest character around. How in the world did he write Alphys? Like what was the story behind that? I feel like those conversations will be so helpful, but I haven't seen anybody having them. So the way that
I
do
think
it
that's
is
really smart. Like, yeah, to ask those questions would be really smart. Yeah,
it'd be
there are
fascinating.
also a few folks, like mostly authors, that I know that do a lot of work with, like if they would like to write a story that is outside of their own perspective, that they will bring in other people's, like as even as editors, as writing partners to co-author things with them. And I often wonder that about the folks that, who have not declared any of the, especially within like a queer space, like who haven't declared anything about themselves, but who seem to really understand and capture the story. Like, as was said earlier in the chat, you could really tell the difference between a story that was written, a story about queer women that's written by queer women versus a story about queer women that's written by straight men. Those are very different stories, and they get told in very different ways. And it's obvious from the outset which one you're dealing with. So, it really matters that you have people in the room who can speak to the experience and not assume that you will know how to do it on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're down to 10 minutes. If anybody is in the chat and wants to ask a question, I want to honor. I did say there'd be Q&A time, so I want to honor that and not go past our time. So go ahead and drop those in the chat if you have them. While you're thinking of them, I will say I do think there is. You acknowledged something earlier that it is not every Black person, queer person, whatever responsibility to be your representative and to bear their experience for you. But also, we want to make sure that we're responsibly asking questions. And so, as we walk that tightrope, what does that actually look like? Those conversations of making sure we're never holding anybody's feet to the fire and saying like, you owe me your experience as this, versus I want to make sure that I'm being equitable.
This legitimately might sound crass, but one of the best ways to do that is pay us, right? Like it is perfectly fine if you want to like bring me in as an expert on something like this, then like cool. Tell me that my time is valuable to you. And it's like it's not even a thing where, well, at least for me personally, I don't really like I don't need people to like throw hundreds of dollars at me for showing up to do something. But saying like, hey, I value your expertise in this and your experience in this, so let me like thank you for your time, in whatever way that looks like. And I think that that really legitimately helps, and makes it feel more legitimate and less like you're just kind of being exploited again. Because yeah, it's not fair to just like force people into sharing things that they don't want to share. But if you are going into this as a partnership, saying like, "Hey, I respect you. I'm looking at you as a professional, as someone who is an expert in this. Will you come in and have this conversation and help me learn?" Then that is valuable, and I think for most people, that's a fair trade. Again, can't speak for everybody, but I know that's my experience. It also lets me usually know that you're not thinking of me as a token. You're thinking of me as like, hey, I need somebody who knows their stuff about this. Who do I know? It makes me feel more like a resource and less like a token. And that's appreciated too, especially as somebody who has been put onto many a stage and said, now stand there in the corner and smile and say nothing. I just want your face up there so people don't think I'm a racist, Like that has happened to me so many times. And again, you know the difference between people who legitimately want your opinion and people who just want to pretend like they want your opinion.
Yeah, I think generally, if you want someone to help you with something and you want them to feel like they are valued, you have to give them agency. So if you want help writing your story, whoever you're consulting with needs to have the power of editing over your story. They need to be able to change it if they need to, or if they want to. Um, Otherwise, they're just a sounding board, and that's getting more into exploitation rather than collaboration, I think.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's helpful. It is like I said, it maintains that sense of being a tightrope act, but I think that is helpful perspective to know how to telegraph our level of seriousness, that we're taking people seriously and that we're seeing them as the whole person that they are. So I am always intrigued to hear conversations, especially from people that do look like me, that have better experience of what it might be to be in these conversations and to see what happens behind closed doors and the stressors and the anxieties of life. So Garth, I'm particularly interested in hearing some of your experience as somebody that does look like me in these conversations of racial equity and in these awkward notes.
So when I played in online games, it's almost never directed at me. Um, Whenever there is an incident of somebody being racist, um, what it is, they're just generally using the term as an insult, a generic insult. But something I always try to remember is that when people say things like that or behave that way, they usually have two motives. The first is they want to upset and offend on purpose. And the second, which isn't always present, but usually is in some degree, is that they want validation. So when people behave in racist ways in a public space, even an anonymous public space, they're looking for those two things. And so if you want to prevent them from repeating that, you need to provide neither. And so if someone, say I killed someone in League of Legends and they call me a racial slur, uh, me saying "How dare you" is them getting a rise out of me. They've accomplished that goal. Me trying to laugh it off is them feeling validated. They've accomplished that goal. So instead, my general tactic is just to say, "Well, it's a messed up thing to say," and then not respond further, because it is not me getting upset, and it's me very much not validating them either through silence or through agreement. And it shuts down the conversation immediately. And so what they will come away from that encounter thinking is, this isn't going to work for upsetting people. And in this social space, I did something that was not considered acceptable. And so it helps push people towards at least not behaving in that way, and can also help push people towards a realization of, why am I doing this if it's not working, if it's not achieving my goals? And then why is this something that I'm defaulting to when I'm getting upset? And I forgot the rest of your question.
No, you're good. I think just providing perspective there has been super helpful. So I am continuing to be intrigued by your D&D, or not, you didn't say D&D, just your tabletop games that you're doing at the brewery with church folk, and some of the things that you're learning there. So we are obviously a church, and we are fully online, and so all of us typically go to our other churches or our main churches or our other communities or other spaces that we inhabit. So if we wanted to bring an equitable and welcoming tabletop game to our local brewery, what would be one piece of tangible advice that we could do? What's one learning that you've had that everyone should take away from it?
Build a good team. Because that is what helped us. Was we went into it with the attitude of like, we are going to intentionally build this as a safe space, and we all agreed on what a safe space meant. So we had that conversation, we were all in agreement, so we knew what our behavior was going to be like, what we were going to tolerate and what we weren't, and how to gently redirect if that was applicable, or how to end like a situation if it needed to be ended. And so we went into it as a team, knowing that the brewery that we partner with is intentional about that as well. They're intentionally an inclusive space. One of, I think there's 3 businesses in Winchester that like specifically say, we are LGBTQ friendly. So we were intentional about choosing that brewery for that reason. It's a kid friendly space because the folks who own the brewery have children, and their kids are there all the time, and they've got games set up for kids, and just, it is a space that was intentionally made with inclusion in mind in many ways. It's accessible, and just lots of things like that. So finding good partners, and making sure everybody's on the same team with the goals is important. And then if you're going to do it in a faith context, there's also the deciding how much faith, like how much religion you plan to put in it. For us, our RPG group is much more about fellowship, and it's about learning. It's a gateway for us to get to start building relationships. And then once we've built those relationships, if it makes sense to say like, hey, if you want to come join us on a Sunday, that's great. Or we've got some other things going on. Here's a service project you might be interested in. Seems like you're having a rough time. Can I pray for you? Like, just when it feels appropriate, we might go there, but it is 100% about how do we build relationships with the people in our community. And it is not about how do we get people to show up in our church on a Sunday morning. So we went into it wanting to be a resource and a safe space, and that being the point. And that was really helpful as well, was everybody being on the same page and knowing like, when we mean evangelism, what we mean in this situation is being Christ for people, not necessarily saying, please come worship Christ in my space the way that I want you to, but saying, hey, we're here, we're in the community, we think you're awesome, we love you, we've set this space up so that, no matter who you are, you can come and game with us. And I promise that you'll feel safe and welcome there. And that was the goal, and that's what we do.
There are very few people nowadays who are not in church because they don't know about it. Almost everyone who has left church or religion does not go there because they either don't believe in it, or they feel threatened by it,
Or have been hurt by it.
or have been hurt by it. And you're never going to get people to not feel threatened by a door if you're trying to push them through it. I used to be a dog walker professionally. And one of the things I learned about dog psychology was that if you have, like when I would go to people's apartments, they would sometimes have dogs that were very afraid of me and would bark and growl. Um, and what I figured out to do was to sit near the dog and do something completely unrelated, play on my phone, watch YouTube videos, and ignore them completely. Because the dog needed was not me to say, hey, I need you to calm down, or hey, I'm telling you that I'm not threatening. The dog needed to see me being non threatening in order for them to be able to trust me again, trust that I was not going to hurt them. And I think as the church, we need to do the same thing. If we want people to not be threatened by the church and to trust the church, we need to show that we are trustworthy without just yelling, hey, we're trustworthy.
Right. Money where your mouth is, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like do the work. Do it. Like if you're gonna be trustworthy people, show up and be trustworthy people. That's the important thing. Yep.
That's awesome.
Sorry,
Have
the dog is after the
Speaking of-
leftovers of our communion bread.
Well, the dog heard dog and was like, talking about me.
Yep.
Here I come. Okay, well, I do want to respect your time. Is there anything else that you didn't get to say? One last kind of thought before we wrap up for the night. Anything you want to add?
Thank you for the invitation and getting to spend time with you all. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's a great thing to have the conversation, and it's really wonderful to know that there are people who are thinking about this and learning how to do it for themselves. And it's a beautiful thing to watch the both the nerd community and the church community grow in its diversity and love of everybody.
Yeah, and thank you for letting us go on so many tangents.
Yeah, sorry.
Look, if there's
Not
one thing,
concise people.
if there's one thing that we know from being people that stream like 9 hours a week, it's going off on tangents. We can go, we can talk about this stuff, and we can go off for a while. So let's get some chats in the clap for our wonderful guests. We so appreciate you and appreciate y'all being here and for giving us your time. Folks, as we depart from this place, we're going to pray before we go, but I want to encourage you to think, as we always do with our nerdy sermons, what can you take away from this? What can you use with this in your life? What does this actually mean for us today? How can we go out into this space beyond, go back into our lives, whether they be digital or whether they be physical? What can we take away from these things? I hope that you'll think about it. I hope that you'll pray about it and consider some of the wonderful insights that we've gotten tonight, whether it just be table rules, how can you better implement table rules, or whether it be some of the mic drop moments that we've also gotten in the conversations. I hope that you'll consider that. And with that, receive this benediction and go from this place out into the night. I so again appreciate you being here and being a part of this time and this conversation. I thank you, Annalise and Garth, for your time and your presence in this space. So receive now this benediction. Go forth into the world, seeking a more equitable space around the stories that we love and the games that we play. May your tables be as open as your hearts, and may we humbly welcome people for all that they are. Go in peace, friends. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you. I'll see you around the Discord. Bye.